Welcome to Soil and Soul, where we're regenerating nutrition from the ground up. Because, in fact, the only difference between soil and soul is you.
Okay, so we're back, and we wanted to talk a little bit more. We ended our first segment on regenerative agriculture. And you look at how there's only 53 years left. We're back with Sandy here. Sandy shared some interesting quotes. Henry Cantwell Wallace, the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, 1921 to 1924. Quote, "Nations endure only as long as they're topsoil." That was in 1921, and you look at that and you look at Franklin D. Roosevelt. A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. Here we are, Sandy, with 53 years left. I'm turning 50 next year. Can you believe that? And you can believe it. You're supposed to say, "I can't believe it."
I can't believe it.
Supplements.
I can't believe it. Yeah, you're almost a day over 20.
There you go. Perfect. Good. That's what I tell myself anyway. But, you look at turning 50 next year, it's not that long. I mean, so that's why we started True Grace. And that's one of the things when we learned about it, Tom Newmark, who you're familiar with,
Yep.
is a friend of you and serves on the Science and Ag Board with True Grace here. And we're going to do a segment with Tom and his daughter as well coming up, which can be a great segment. But he's the one that always inspired me, but really brought that level of awareness where when he had we sold a company that he had sold and was CEO of, and then had a farm down in Costa Rica, and he ended up taking that farm and converting it into a learning and education center, Finca Luna Nueva farm, which is now under with a partnership with Tom's daughter, Sarah Newmark, who's our COO, and the relationship there is now into the True Grace kind of family of land learning, that we're trying to do here. And we were just down there in Costa Rica, Christy and Sarah and I, and learning what's coming out of there from a teaching center. But he was the one that said to me in 2016 and said, "Hey, you know what? We got 60 harvests left." Because I called him and I said, "Tom, what's new? What are you working on? What's happening?" I'm thinking he's down in Costa Rica retiring and,
Right.
Sitting in a hammock. And that wasn't the case. He said, "I found my life's passion, and it's the regenerative agriculture movement." And I said, "What is that?" And there we were, 4 years later. And then True Grace came into the picture with that. When we heard about this with Tom and Sarah in 2016. And we said, "Okay, Tom, there's 60 harvests left." Christy was pregnant with our daughter Grace at the time, hence True Grace. And so when we learned about that, Tom came up and we wanted to learn more on what we can do. And Christy's family has a foundation, right? And they do work all over the world from a sustainability, philanthropic, humanitarian, efforts all over. And this kind of fell in the sustainability window. And that's where, when you look at the roots, the beginnings of the regenerative agriculture, which we're going to talk about here with you and Sandy in a second. But, when you look at the roots to that, it was the family foundation of Christy and her mom and her brother, that kind of stepped up and funded the underwriting of the white papers with Tom Newmark and Rodale to develop and write the standard for ROC in regenerative agriculture.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
And so when you look at that, was from 2016 to 2020. So it wasn't until that was it. That was our passion. But then it was in 2019 in December, and Christy and I were sitting there at the dinner table, and we're like, "Gosh, it's 57 years left, like the clock's ticking. Like, what are we going to do?" And that's where we kind of stepped in, and Christy and I looked at each other and said, well, with our background of, building companies in this industry and having a passion for nutrition and supplements and whatnot, we're like, maybe that's our calling. If we start True Grace, and grace means to give honor and credit to the planet. It's our daughter's name. It's when we learned about regenerative agriculture. But we also knew that if we were going to do this, we wanted to be true to ourselves, true to the planet, and most importantly, true to you retailers and staff that are listening, and consumers as well. And that's one of the things that we did here. So with starting True Grace, and that's when we were introduced to Sandy through, our neighbor, like we talked about in our first segment there, John, who, think about that is fantastic story. So when we started True Grace, we also, the Family Foundation and True Grace, partnered on a mission with Rodale. It was a 3-year mission where we donated hundreds of hours of free consultancy through Rodale for farmers in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and Illinois that wanted to convert their land. And, I want to congratulate you. It's a big, big, big news that was it in 2022 that you became, I think, the first ROC certified farm in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We did it.
Yeah.
Oh my God. You did it. I didn't do anything.
True Grace was very helpful in that process because without, Leah from Rodale's, on-farm consultation as well as, remote and virtual consultation to go through, really walk through that process, it would have been more difficult without that support. So, kudos to True Grace and
Rodale and that entire partnership.
Yep.
And that's one of the key things when you look at here, and we want to talk about regenerative agriculture. 53 years left. We don't have much time. If you're listening out there or watching, we need to make some movement and bring awareness to it. So when you look at the consultancy and things like that, talk a little bit about regenerative agriculture. There's 6 principles, right, Sandy? I mean, so essentially, talking about cover crop and, I think at one time we went out to your farm, Christy and I, and we had our feet basically, I think, in it, or across the street. Across the street, there was like a conventional farm. Mm-hmm. It was a friend of yours, I think, that you knew. And we took a little sample of that soil, and it was just hard to even put your foot in the shovel and get that sample.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about the journey to regenerative agriculture. And you mentioned in the first segment as well, just because you're buying organic doesn't mean it's nutrient dense, right?
No, I think, through the National Organic Program and organic farmers that are out there, they're all striving to do a better job, but the market still only rewards the farmer on yield. So just like we were talking about the broccoli farmer not getting paid for calcium in broccoli, the strawberry farmer in our previous segment, with your daughter and the strawberry that she spit out, the farmer's not getting paid more. He's getting paid on a pound basis for strawberries.
So thought of it that way.
So, I think that as regenerative agriculture and a regenerative organic certification matures, there's going to be further learning about nutrient density of foods, right? You go to the gas pump and you spend your dollar on the basis of like 3 or 4 choices, right?
Right.
This is the octane that's going into your engine.
Yeah.
And you're given more choices than you are when you buy a strawberry or tomato at the grocery store. So I truly feel, and maybe this podcast will be the prediction of that, but you'll get to the grocery store someday, some grocery stores, not all, and they will have nutrient density indexes. There'll be NDIs. Instead of the octane level in the fuel, you're going to be able to buy this NDI tomato, this NDI tomato, or this NDI tomato. And you're going to realize that just like the octane in the car, that when you make that fuel choice, you're going to be buying that octane for your own fuel. You're going to be fueling your body with those nutrients. And then at that point in time, consumers will be aware of the nutrients that they're buying, not just filling themselves with potentially vacuous, nutrient void products. But farmers are then going to be incentivized, through the natural process of capitalism to be managing their soils in a way, or be rewarded. If you're a ROC certified farmer and I'm growing a tomato that has a nutrient density index of 100 and the neighbor who's not regenerative organic but organic, it's growing to 75. And people want to buy my really flavorful, nutrient-dense tomato. That's going to drive changes.
Right.
Ultimately, and I've said it for a long time because I don't want to disparage conventional farmers. You were talking about, over there trying to chisel out a piece of the neighbor's farm. That farmer's doing what he has to do or she has to do, to keep their operation going, maybe keep it for another generation, pay the bills, so, and try and eke out a living. Farmers in this country that want to cross the road with the concrete like soil and everyone else grow what people want. So when I have an opportunity, and I think I have one right now, when you're doing a podcast that's going to get to people that are talking to eaters, consumers in the aisle of a store, there's no farmer in this country anyhow that I've ever met that really wants to destroy the planet, right? Or end
it's not their intent.
Yeah, end the harvests, right? I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing until I can't do it anymore. They're doing it because that's what's demanded of them by the consumer market as a whole. And whether that's been manipulated by consumer packaged good companies, food companies, chemical companies, seed companies, fertilizer, anyhow, whatever it is, at the end of the day, the power is really in the hands of the person in that aisle.
Right.
So the people that you're working with through True Grace, if they can be empowered to, even in some small way, understand and then steer people to that choice, this very similar choice that they have at the gas pump every time they fuel their car up, and they begin to buy those more nutrient dense foods, they're going to change the agricultural landscape. I mean, that's going to be the driver at the end of the day. And companies like True Grace and a few others that through the good graces of our regenerative organic certification, there's a small amount of consumer packaged good people out there that are wanting to do what True Grace was a pioneer of, right? And have more of their ingredients, more of their inputs, more of their acres, regeneratively, organically farmed.
Right.
And so that means if you're buying a bottle of True Grace supplements, or whether you're buying a cracker from a regenerative organic cracker company or whatever it is, those things they're not only directly impacting my life and other farmers' lives from the standpoint of our ability to grow a crop that we get a small financial reward for doing that we would otherwise not get, which probably a significant portion of that is going to just go back into more cover crops and more, corrective nutrients and things that are going to, make the next crop more successful and more nutrient dense, and really, create sort of a snowball effect in that.
And building it's not been easy. I mean, I will tell you, when I got, every day you get discouraged sometime, I mean, it's like, it's an uphill battle to try and change, the consumer thought pattern, and it's not easy. But you look at, when we started True Grace, and for the retailers that are listening out there and the people working in the aisles and whatnot, the intent was truly, in the mission and the vision, was to bring awareness to regenerative agriculture. That's our mission and vision, in changing the nutrient density of because we care more about the foods that you're putting into your body than even our supplements, because we know that's what's going to really impact people's lives. But it hasn't been easy, I'll tell you. And that's one of the things where you look at the supply chain and trying to build that supply chain. Like, a lot of companies will market, regenerative, and they're using it as a marketing platform,
right?
And that's, I know, and I know that a lot of our true believers in True Grace and the mission of the company and out there listening, that's not what we're doing here. We are really working hard to partner with farms like yourself, and we're working on some things to grow and to bring that into the True Grace.
I mean, in farmer terminology, there's a difference between building the bandwagon and riding the bandwagon.
Yeah.
And True Grace has truly been a bandwagon builder, from the
With
from the
white
ground
elk
up,
and,
from the
yep.
ground up.
Thank you.
And yes, you will see other companies and potentially even other labels. I mean, you go, there's how many labels are there on products now?
A lot.
And it's very rewarding and I can certainly attest to the fact that True Grace is deeply and firmly committed to the regenerative organic.
Thank you. And I think, when you look at our younger generation, it brought, because Christy and I we're married and we own a company, co-found a company together and whatnot. And it's like, man, we talk about that in the car quite a bit, and the kids are in the back seat, and for 2 or 3 years, and Pierce is now 5. And we were driving down the road one time, as we often do in Wisconsin and Illinois, Iowa, and places, and you don't see much but dirt, in the certain times of the year. And, and Pierce popped up his head one time. He's like, Mommy, Daddy, look, no cover crop over there. And it's like, we both look at each other like, wow, that's we need. That's the education that we need to inspire others around that. So let's talk a little bit about the regenerative journey, because you have, regenerating soil. And I think, our COO, Sarah, always told me is the word kind of sustainable is like
it's worn out.
I mean, like, we can't sustain.
Why would we want to sustain the system that's out there?
Exactly.
The dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, the concrete hard soil that you try to chisel. Why would we want to sustain that?
Right. Exactly. And so you look at that and you look at, so we need to do more. And I mean, the main thing is to regenerate. And yes, there's the certifications. Right. So there is certifications out there, with the Regenerative Organic Certified.
But your listeners and people who, see this, hear this, need to realize that when they certify, I mean, there's boots on the ground.
Yeah.
I just went through my ROC certification. The certifier came out. We visited every field. That's 58 fields.
Jeez.
Boots on the ground, looking at them. And through the USDA program, I mean, everything from my seed tags, fertilizer tags, all those documents, my USDA certification takes an entire day.
Yeah.
And those files are all opened up. And I think that sometimes that may be where some farmers, some humans in general would maybe resist the certification process, because it does require that openness and that transparency. Not that there's any nefarious activities, but just some people aren't really interested in opening up the file cabinet, to a stranger.
Right.
So, but I find it very rewarding every year, for the decades that we've been certified organic, and now a couple of ROC certifications. The level of detail and the passion that these people have, to come out and really be doing the good work and get on these farms and be on the front lines to assure that when there is an ROC certification or a USDA certification, that it means something.
Right.
And I can tell you firsthand that, and it's not, it's, if you have good record keeping and you're, willing to open all those records to a certifier and then spend the time to go through the process itself, it's a reaffirming process, not necessarily an invasive one. So,
right.
If a farmer were listening to this and thinking about organic certification, or even better, regenerative organic certification, do it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And, the journey's sometimes not easy, right? But it's one that's, we need to go through the journey.
Well, and it's the USDA certification, and ROC mimics that. It's about continual improvement. We started out with a bronze certification, at ROC, and we're required to improve.
Right.
I just got notice a couple of days ago that we've achieved silver status now.
Nice, congrats.
With some other efforts to further document our soil disturbance plans and all the things that meet the pillars of ROC. But it's not a static or a one and done. Even if I just keep doing the same things, as the learning of what ROC really means evolves, what's going to happen on farms is going to evolve as well.
Right. That's great. And so you look at, there was I think you shared with me on Breedlove 2006 from Purple Cow, but on a per acre basis, every 1% of soil organic matter will hold approximately 16,500 gallons of water in the tops 12 inches of soil. So there's more, there's more to nutrient density about regenerating soil health and growing organic matter, right? It can be measured.
Right.
And so that's one of the things where you look at that, and it's all about carbon sequestration, water infiltration rates, and the water table. I mean, when you start to really understand the role that soil plays in our lives, I mean, it's just unbelievable. So let's talk a little bit about the exchange of nutrients from the soil that are in a regenerative organic type system where you have a great level of organic matter. And you mentioned, and I think in our first segment, the word microbiome. I think I saw one of your stats here that said about the amount of organisms in a teaspoon of compost.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it is, when I've heard this before, I don't know if it's true or not, you can kind of verify it for me, but in a thimble full of regenerative organic soil or organic soil biodynamic, there's more microbes in there than there are people on the planet.
I've always attributed it to like a handful of healthy
handful.
soil. A handful of healthy soil contains more living organisms than there are people on the planet.
I mean, it's just, and so the job of these, let's
when
talk.
those numbers get really big like that, people kind of glaze over, like, oh, wow. But, when you looked at that soil that was hard to even get, a handful out with a shovel, that soil is devoid of that life.
Right.
And, all those organisms are just like us. They need to eat, they need to breathe oxygen, and they need water. So if we have hard compacted soil, or soil low in organic matter that isn't holding on to and storing that water, microbes, fortunately, don't necessarily always die of thirst. They'll go into a dormant phase. But if they're dormant, they're not doing the function that they were intended to do in the soil. So, 1% of organic matter holding that 15 or 20,000 gallons of water, that's in each rain event, right?
Yeah.
So, we get typically here in this part of the state of Wisconsin, not all of them, heavy enough to store all of that water. But, we have fields that used to not have wetlands, that now had sort of wet, marshy areas that are now drying up because the water is going into that soil instead of over the top. Wow. That 1% organic matter also holds in today's market prices about $750 to $1,000 worth of nutrients. So those are nutrients that are naturally cycled by that biology that lives and needs that organic matter as housing and as a food source. So if I can increase my organic matter 1%, I've stored all that water, but I've also held on to or cycled, upwards of $1,000 per acre of nutrients. Those are nutrients I don't have to buy, or those are nutrients that even if I wasn't buying them, might be micronutrients and secondary nutrients that are becoming available through that biological process. That are going to be. That's why we don't see and can get by without using insecticides and fungicides, because the plants are healthy enough that they have their own natural defense system.
Yeah. I think you mentioned the one time when I was out on your farm, you were giving Christy and I a tour. And one of the things that we, with insurance, I think, is that where we were, I think it was sweet pea vine or one of those things you were growing, but then you had another crop in there to, I don't know if it was insects or whatever. You can kind of tell the listeners the story, but you can't get like crop insurance, right? Because
right. A lot of the crops that we grow, because they aren't historically grown here, sunflowers, pinto beans, dry edible beans, seed crops for a seed company over in Minnesota. because the predominant volume of the 90 or 100,000 acres that are in our county grows corn and soybeans, the insurance companies don't have actuary tables to be able to say, well, I grow a lot of rye, for instance. I'm a big rye fan, Rye Revival. Another farmer and I started a nonprofit to really try and get rye back in fields. It's an amazing crop, but nevertheless, I can't insure rye, right? And even if I were to insure rye, we come in the spring and we put clover in the rye, before the ground thaws, and that clover grows 75 to 100% of the nitrogen we need for the following corn crop or sunflower crop. But I can't insure a small grain, let's say that was wheat, which I could insure in this county, if it has another crop growing in it.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I suppose they are concerned that, there might be a nutrient demand from the second crop, that would impact the yield, which then muddies the water as to how you would, like if the yield wasn't there, and in a year where a farmer would really want crop insurance, we had the worst drought here, this summer, in the past 20 years. So yes, in that situation, a farmer that had, an underseeded crop that was there to provide, diversity and nutrient cycling, was also taking water away from the insured crop, might be why they, and in that instance, they're probably right. Growing two crops with with a low amount of water, you're going to get underperformance of both crops. And how do you go about determining what the underperformance of the insured crop is when that second crop is there?
Right.
Long term, they should be paying people to put the clover in those crops.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a drought like that for 20 years. So fine, if you don't want to insure my lower rye yield or wheat yield because I put some clover in there, then pay me for all the nitrogen that I grew on my farm for the 19 years of the last 20 that I didn't need to truck in. I didn't have the fossil fuels. I didn't have the trucks running on the road. I didn't have all that stuff for almost 20 years. But it does make it difficult in an organic system where we have insurance, which should be there, for natural disasters like this hailstorm, a flood, a drought. And that leveling that playing field from a crop insurance standpoint is something that I've actively worked with, legislators about getting done. And that is one of the barriers to, especially if you're a conventional farmer and you're looking to transition to organic, and you have a lot of debt and you have a big farm and you have $800,000 tractors and stuff you got to pay for. Yeah. The banker's not going to let you grow something that isn't insured, much less do you want your own personal risk adversity. So I don't know how we got down that path. But
we always seem to go down these paths.
It can always be edited. It can always be edited out.
There's no editing here. Trust me, this is all good stuff. So let's talk then about
the 1% organic.
The exchange then of these microbes, because it's really the microbes in the soil, that life bridge of the transfer of inorganic minerals into living food minerals, right? Glycoprotein of that food. And so when you look at the exchange, you have the microbes in the soil, you have the plants, okay? So then you have the carbon, nitrogen, right? So talk to me a little bit about that and that exchange. What is the microbes need the carbon, they need the nitrogen, and the plants, like, what's the exchange there between a microbe?
The plants are pulling carbon out of the atmosphere, right? So they inhale carbon,
right,
and exhale oxygen, which without living plants, we'd probably suffer from the standpoint of the oxygen we need to breathe. They take that carbon, I'm going to oversimplify it, but they take that carbon along with the products of photosynthesis, the sugars and the carbohydrates, and pump that, into a complex carbon molecule, a carbohydrate, molecule. They use, 40 to 60% of that for their own metabolism and their own plant growth. And they use
the microbes need those sugars, those carbohydrates.
Right, right.
Got
And
it.
the plants themselves,
Got it.
the plants themselves produce, compounds that they can use directly without microbial interchange. The big happening occurs when the plants intentionally leak that liquid sunshine, that carbon rich, uh, sugar, naturally complex sugar supported exudate through its roots, and that feeds the biology, the bacteria and the fungi. They in turn go and have specific functions in the soil where they are able to, fungi, for instance, with really, really low pH, more acidic than sulfuric acid, can go out and actually dissolve the rock minerals like calcium, phosphorus, potassium, and put them in a soluble form that the plant can take up. There's even another, very recently, probably only 15, 20 years ago now, that they discovered the functions of mycorrhiza fungi.
Right.
And with heavy chemical use, high salt fertilizers, and even excessive tillage. So that's why in regenerative organic certification, we're constantly trying to minimize our intensity and frequency of tillage. But those mycorrhiza fungi actually connect to the end of a plant root, and they can go out, thousands of feet beyond the distance that the actual root could.
You showed me pictures of that,
Yeah.
where like little nodules on the root.
Yeah, so the plant shares these root exudates, right? These carbohydrates with the mycorrhiza, and the mycorrhiza go out and exchange for water and phosphorus and bring it back to the plant. But it's literally like a currency exchange in the soil, you might say. I mean, it's literally a trade.
Wow.
And again, if you're doing things that damage or create an environment where those mycorrhiza cannot survive or function or perform to their maximum, you don't get that exchange.
So would that be like with the applications of NPK and with some of those fertilizers? Like, what is it that in our society today, in our current agricultural system, is allowing, can I say, the soil being dead? I mean, because soil is a living thing if you have those microbes in there. I mean,
Right.
What potentially causes the absence of the
Like
microbiology?
phosphorus, for instance, which has always been sort of crazy to me, but phosphorus fertilizers, there's these natural positive and negative charged particles in soil. And when phosphorus fertilizer is applied, scientists have repeatedly tested that upwards of 80% of that immediately gets attached to a soil colloid and is not plant available.
Wow.
Yeah. So 80 cents of every dollar that you put phosphorus fertilizer down, you're only getting 20 cents on the dollar in return to your plant. And then the other thing that's unfortunate about phosphorus fertilizer, highly soluble phosphorus fertilizer, is that the microbes in the soil, they can sit on the couch and eat potato chips. They don't have to go to work. So nitrogen fixing bacteria, phosphorus solubilizing bacteria, if they're in environments that there's luxurious amounts of those nutrients, I have no job. So I can just park it. Actually creating these cyclings where plants have to produce root exudates to feed and nurture soil biology that then go out and liberate nutrients is when you see this exchange of nutrients happening. If we're using synthetic or highly soluble, literally nutrients that the plant can just drink up without any microbial partner being involved in the exchange, those microbial partners also then don't do anything.
Interesting. It's all, I mean, it's like, really, I mean, it's kind of like fermentation in a sense, right? When you look at how these different types of bacteria and different things like that can, even in foods, break down the sugars and the starches and these different things.
In our own guts.
Exactly, in our own guts. And it's, where they even say that 90% of our immune system lies in our gut, and these powerful microbes are so critical. And you look at the benefits of, say, a kimchi versus sauerkraut, or yogurt, a good rich yogurt versus milk, the benefits of fermentation. So it's kind of that similar process of fermentation in the soil, in that mineral exchange. And that's even at True Grace, and like in our multivitamins, we're using a fermented mineral complex that's a glycoprotein bound, and it's a very kind of similar process where the plant has essentially pre-digested these minerals and bound it to its protein carriers and carbohydrate carriers of food,
right?
Where then it becomes more readily available. It's not like we grew up taking chalk out of the ground, calcium carbonate,
right,
and then chewed on it,
right. No, having it one step further, or in a plant, where it's a more complex whole food type of a nutrient, and that there is probably very similar parallels, good parallels to that as far as the way soil microbiome, the soil is the digestive system of the plant, right? I mean, ultimately, that's where the nutrients lay. That's where the water is stored and hopefully available. So the plant doesn't have any ability to transform those nutrients itself. So it has to share those root exudates with the microbiome in the soil. And then that microbiome is what takes and liberates those nutrients from the soil and makes them plant available.
Fascinating. And so those are some of the things when you look at, the nutrient density of the foods we're eating, and you look at the average mineral content. Here's a slide I'm looking at that you shared with me that shows the averages amounts of calcium, magnesium, iron, and spinach and tomatoes. And back in 1910, 1920s, you're looking at 400, 1990s, 2000s down to 50. I mean, when's the light bulb going to go off? And then you see is it a causation or a correlation of of a lot of the health challenges? We don't make any claims here, obviously, on our podcast or whatnot, but people are coming into your stores and they're deficient, and that's one of the things where I was in the practitioner space. I learned that 55% of the patients that were going into practitioners were deficient in magnesium. And they say in the next 7 to 10 years, roughly 60 to 70% of the population is going to be deficient in zinc. These are critical immunosupportive spark plugs of our cellular health, these minerals. And if they're not coming, they're coming from the soil. They're not coming from anywhere else. So
if they're not in the soil, they won't be in the plant.
Exactly.
Or if they are in the soil and the plant soil interaction is not microbially supported, then those nutrients are just going to stay locked up in the soil,
right,
and not get to the plant.
Yeah. And so if you're listening and you're watching out there, and again, we need to spread the word. We need to talk about regenerative agriculture in the aisles, bring awareness to it, because that's where, if in fact, I think when you look at, you mentioned, I think it was in our first podcast session there, where there might be a nutrient NDI,
right? Nutrient density.
When you walk into your stores or whatnot.
Write that down, because it's going to happen.
And you're starting to see it. I mean, you do see in some of the stores now, and I've gone around and I've spoken this to retailers for 3 years, but you will see, I didn't bring it down to that, but I was like, you'll see conventional produce section in a store, you'll see a organic, and then you will see a regenerative organic. Mm-hmm. Obviously hoping the correlation of the NDI is greater with the regenerative system, but you look at that and you see that that change needs to be made, and we just need to bring awareness to it. And so, when you looked at, I wanted to go back to something as well. I think it was the broccoli. We talk broccoli, getting our kids to eat broccoli and getting our kids to eat any of the organic vegetables can be a challenge in a lot of moms' lives out there. But this one study suggests that we would need to eat 4 to 5 times as much broccoli today to get the same nutrient value as broccoli grown in the 1950s. And that's it. That sums it up right there. And that's one of the reasons why, actually, you and I have talked about this, but at True Grace, we created the first superfood powder broccoli microgreen Regenerative Organic Certified. So it was one of the first, I think, I'll say, if not the first, food supplement on the market as 100% ROC certified, non-GMO project verified, and USDA organic certified. And it's a great, it's also a product, Alon Sudberg from, he's on our Science and Ag board as well, but it's also Alchemist Assured, so it's a seal of approval from a third party testing lab that this actually is 100% what we say it is. And we've been putting this into our kids. So a little bit about microgreens, when you look at the fact that you have the seed, right? A sprout, and then the microgreen phase, but then that also then becomes the plant, right? I mean, that's kind of the stage is that the life cycle of like a broccoli plant?
Yeah, I mean, microgreen is I think by its definition, a plant that's grown to its first true leaf.
Understood. Got it.
A seed comes out of the ground. Then there's the first two leaves that come out are called cotyledons, and those are actually a product of the energy and the nutrients that were stored in the seed. And then the plant grows to the first true leaf. And at that stage, it would be a plant that would actually begin to photosynthesize and function as a connection to the soil.
Yeah.
So microgreens, are ultimately transforming that stored energy and nutrients in the seed up until that first true leaf, where at that point in time, some of those nutrients and energy would be lost. So it's all contained. And again, to your point of fermentation or transformation, or how are we doing this with soil, making nutrients available for the plant? If we were to, grind up and just eat broccoli seeds, our digestive systems would not have an ability to extract optimally. And I'm not a scientist, and I may be talking out of school here, but having the plant actually function in soil to convert the nutrients and energy in that seed into a form that is more highly digestible, which is the microgreen, is the way to take advantage of that little compact stored. I mean, seeds are amazing, right? I mean, it's maintaining all the genetic traits of the plant. It's compressed and stored enough energy that with the proper moisture and sunlight, it's going to come back to life again. So there's a lot of amazing, and probably even some things that are unknown about the nutrients that are in seeds.
Yeah.
And microgreens are a way to unlock those nutrients.
That's fantastic. And, there's studies out there that will show that actually in that microgreen phase, it's kind of houses the entire energetic life cycle for the entire plant. Like, for example, full mature broccoli flower, it might take 90 days to grow, but it needs that energy source, like you're saying, from that microgreen phase to get there. And then also the microgreens can consume 90% less water to grow. So it's a 7 to 10 day growing cycle. After the sprouting phase, the cotyledon phase, like you're talking about, and then getting into that mature plant. But we got to get this into our kids. We put this in, I think Pierce now calls it his green monster juice. Right. We mix it in with Matt's organic orange juice, and he loves it. He shakes it up and he takes it on the way to school every day. And it's not like you need a lot, you know? I mean, when you look at broccoli.
What is it, like an eighth of a teaspoon or
quarter of a teaspoon? Yeah, quarter of a teaspoon. And, the nutrient, there's so many benefits to glucosinolates, sulforaphanes, all of those things that can help to support our body's natural antioxidant processes within it. And again, how are we going to eat 4 to 5 times as much broccoli and get that into our children? And then, you overcook it, and it's, you got to mash it with a bunch of butter and put it in the salt. That's the only way to get it down these kids. So I know you love this. We love it too. Yeah. So that's ROC certified. That was a journey. That was a 2-year journey. And I think when we stepped out in True Grace, and we were like, in the very beginning, like, well, we want to be the first to have a ROC supplement. And oh gosh, didn't know what was coming out of my mouth, the journey that.
But it's not even just an ROC supplement. It's like a whole new thing. It's
a whole new thing.
Yeah.
A whole new thing.
So I'm sure that was a heavy lift, but it's, I use the product. It's a great product.
Thank you. Yeah, what's great is it's freeze dried. I mean, it's soil grown.
Yep.
You harvest it, right at that 7 to 10 day window. It's right in the freezer, and then it's freeze dried. So it houses all those nutrients things in there as well. So those are some of the things I think that we're trying to do here at True Grace. To really regenerate nutrition from the ground up, and we couldn't do it without partners like you. So we really. From the entire team of True Grace, from all of our retailers out there listening, and the staff in the aisles, I know that they're all very grateful for what you're doing and the education that you're providing on there, and more to come with Sandy Syburg and Brian Hall. I think you mentioned you had that. The Purple Cow, was it the Purple Cow bus when you took that bus? Maybe we need to do a True Grace, do a conversion and
hit the road
and do a road show. And park it in retailers' parking lots with them.
Yeah, that was a fun project.
Yeah,
that was a fun project.
Yep. So that'll be our next road trip. But thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Everything you do. Thanks, and we'll have you back.
Great.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Soil and Soul. Spread the word. Spread the mission. We're in this together.